School of Business from Ukraine. I knew him when he was like did the first presentation for the kids for the college admission. Long time. So he's a very big scholar, local Miami boy, and today his subject is scientific and mathematical achievement in ancient India. So we can start.
Namaste everyone. I am Sugandh Khanna, and today I will be giving a presentation on scientific and mathematical achievement in ancient India. Before I begin, I would like to sing a Jain bhajan. If you all know and can sing, please join. Arihanto ko namo namah, Siddhom ko namo namah, Acharyom ko namo namah, Jai bolo Bhagavan ki. Arihantom ko namo namah, Siddhom ko namo namah, Acharyom ko namo namah, Jai bolo Bhagavan ki. 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 Upadhyaya ko namo namah, Sarva sadhu ko namo namah, Pancha Parmeshti namo namah. Jai bolo Bhagavan ki. 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 Namo namo Arihantanam, Namo namo Siddhanam, Namo namo Ayariyanam, Namo namo Vajayanam, Namo loya sarvasavunam, Namo loya sarvasavunam, Namo loya sarvasavunam. Jai bolo Bhagavan ki. 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 So as you all know, today or tomorrow is going to be the Ram Mandir inauguration, and I want to highlight some of the key contributions from people of Jain faith for the Ram Janmabhoomi. One of the most important senior advocates in the Ram Janmabhoomi, the Ayodhya case, is Harishankar Jain, and his contributions are very critical for the Pran Pratishtha of that mandir. And also, there is a Jain business owner, Rajendra Kotaria, from the Bengaluru region. He has manufactured and donated a Surya Tilak machine, which on Ram Navami will shine the light from the sun on the Ram Lalla Virajman idol. So I thought I should highlight that those two very critical contributions, and there are many more, of course. So now let us begin with a discussion on the ancient Indian science and mathematics. So I'm sure many of you have studied mathematics in school, and you've learned the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that is commonly referred to as the Pythagorean theorem. But this formula was actually discovered, developed, and utilized very commonly in ancient India, and it's been given by Maharishi Bodhayana from the 8th century BCE. He has given it in his Sulpa Sutra, where he says that the rope stretched along the diagonal of a rectangle makes an area which the vertical and horizontal sides make together. Now, how does that connect with the Pythagorean theorem? So if you take a rectangle and you draw a diagonal, you get two right triangles, that one of the right triangles is shown in the diagram below, and that diagonal is C, the hypotenuse of the right triangle, and the area which is formed by the diagonal of the hypotenuse is represented by the square, the green square, so that's C squared, and then the other two side lengths, the area of those, the pink and the beige squares, that's A squared and B squared. So that's how A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Bodhayana has also given an approximation of the value of square root of 2, which he says is 1 plus 1 over 3 plus 1 over 3 times 4 minus 1 over 3 times 4 times 34. And this is accurate to 5 decimal places. So now that we have established a geometrical foundation, we need to transition to the next level of mathematics, trigonometry. There was a mathematician by the name of Madhava. He is a Nambudiri from Kerala who lived during the 14th and 15th centuries in ancient India. And at that time, this was before India's independence. So at that time, there were a lot of kingdoms around India, and they provided a lot of support in the form of universities, pathshalas, like the one in this mandir. So they would provide donations and grants for those type of institutions for teachers and researchers to conduct in-depth research in the fields of science and mathematics. So in trigonometry, the main functions are sine theta, cosine theta, and tangent theta, as well as the respective inverse forms of those functions. So Madhava, he has given now we call it the Taylor series, but he has given the infinite series of sine theta, cosine theta, and inverse tangent theta. So if you plug in, the degree value in radians into these formulas, you can get the precise value for sine, cosine, and arc tangent. Of course, later on, the Westerners came along, and I'm sure those of you who have studied calculus, you've heard of a mathematician by the name of Wilhelm Leibniz. And so now they call it the Leibniz series, but it's actually, the original name is the Madhava series. And, Madhava, he also understood that pure mathematics is important, but application is critical too. So he developed what is known as the Madhava's sine table, and that lists all the values of sine theta from 0 to 90 degrees. And that was utilized by people who build mandirs, palaces, and chariots for their calculations. And there was a very strong emphasis on mathematics in ancient India. That's why if you look at a lot of the American companies nowadays, you'll find that they have an Indian origin CEO because of the innate mathematical talent that's in our DNA. Let me tell you a quick story about how a minister in a kingdom utilized mathematics to solve a major problem. So, as I mentioned before, in ancient India, the system of governance was a monarchical system. Now the judiciary in India is separate. You have Supreme Court, you have the various high courts, district and municipal courts. But back then, the king and the ministers, they were responsible for conducting trials, taking evidence, and passing judgments. So during this time, this happened in the Vijayanagara kingdom, headed by King Krishnadeva Raya, and there was a famous minister there by the name of Tenali Raman. So there was a dispute. There was a will dispute. Nowadays will disputes are very common. A lot of conflict happens in families, in US and in India. So there was a dispute. In the will, it had been written that, I have a certain batch of elephants that I own. The passed away father, he had written. And the eldest son will be getting half of my elephants. The second son will be getting the 2/3 of the remaining. And of the remaining, the balance 2/3 will go to the third son. The challenge was, there were 17 elephants. 1/2 of 17 is not a whole number. It's 8.5. So you can't half an elephant, right? So they came to the king and this dispute, dragged on. Then the king appointed Tenali Raman, one of the ministers, to solve this problem. And he came up with a beautiful solution. He borrowed one of the elephants from the king's quarters. So now you have 18 elephants. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So 9 elephants went to the first son. You have 9 elephants left. 18 minus 9 is 9. So 2/3 of that is 6. So 6 elephants went to the second son. So now 9 minus 6 is 3. You have 3 elephants left. And 2/3 of that is 2. So 2 elephants went to the third son. And now you have the balance 1 elephant which went back to the king's quarters. So, everybody was happy and, there was no net gain or loss to anyone. So what this shows is that, even now, everyone here is originally from India, from different states possibly. We all have that innate mathematical talent, and that's because there was an emphasis on math and science in ancient India. So now I want to talk about chess briefly. Chess is actually, people treat it as a game, as a strategical game, but chess is actually a mathematical sport. In ancient India, chess was called Chaturanga, and in Gujarat there's a place called Lothal, and they did an excavation there and found chess pieces and chess board. After doing the carbon dating process, they were able to find that these pieces and boards go back as far as 3000 BCE. And skilled chess players were given support by the kings, so they also played blindfold chess, which is one of the modes of competition chess. In fact, I am a very strong chess player. Does anybody play chess in the audience here? I'm a 2-time Florida State chess champion and 1-time national US Open K-12 champion. So I have a strong interest in chess. And let me tell you a good story about how chess was invented. So back then, an old man, he invented chess and he brought it to the court of the king in front of all the ministers and showed them the game. Mainly the goal was to impress upon the next generation of ministers' sons and their princes, the king's princes, that they can play chess and learn strategic principles through that. So the king was very happy and he told the old man, I'll give you any reward, please ask. And typically back then, jewels, that was and gold coins, that was a common reward. But the old man said, I'm a very old man, I don't need all this jewels and wealth. All I want is, look at this chessboard. It's an 8x8 board with 64 squares. So the first square, I want you to place 1 grain of rice. On the second square, 2 grains of rice. On the third, 4 grains of rice. On the fourth, 8 grains of rice, and like that, the powers of 2. So 2 is a very small number, right? So the king thought, we have such a big kingdom, we can definitely supply this. So he appointed one of his ministers to handle this, reward process. 1 week later, the old man comes back to the king's court and says, I haven't received my reward yet. And the king asks the minister, what's happening? This is a priority, this reward needs to be fulfilled. To which the minister replied, 5, 10 squares, 20 squares, it was okay. But once we started to hit the 30th square, the number of grains ballooned to over 1 billion. And even if we bring all the rice grains in the entire kingdom, we won't be able to supply this. So the king says, okay, like I can't supply this, but I'll give you my whole kingdom. To which the old man, who was a very simple-minded person, said that, that's not my goal, but rather what I want you to do is, I want you to introduce the playing and teaching of chess in all the schools and gurukuls in the kingdom, so that all kids develop the strategic mindset from a very young age. And if you do the calculation for how many, what the total is, it'll be 2 to the power of 65 minus 1. That's the total number of grains of rice that will be required to fulfill that promise. So now, having talked about mathematics, we need to go into physics. Any physicists or engineers in the audience today? Mechanics or electricity and magnetism? Mechanical engineering. Good. So, now everyone says when you study physics, Isaac Newton from England is the father of mechanics. But that's not exactly true. In ancient India, a lot of the laws of motion and gravity have been discussed in great detail. In fact, Europe, for Europeans and Westerners to discover the concept of gravity, it took Galileo and the Leaning Tower of Pisa for them to understand that. And in the Vaisheshika Sutra, which has been given by Maharishi Kannad in the 6th century of BC, he has given all the laws of motion and gravity. In that he says, it's in Sanskrit, but he says the change of motion is due to impressed force. So that's the first law of motion given by Newton. And then he says that the change of motion is proportional to the impressed force and is the directional force. That is the second law of motion, which is given by Isaac Newton in the vectorized format. And he says that action and reaction are equal opposite. That is the third law of motion. Furthermore, he also gives the law of gravitation, that if not held by anything, things will fall due to gravity. So many of you who are present here or watching via Zoom are probably wondering, this level of innovation is present in ancient India. So why it is not being brought and taught at the global level? The reason being, all this is present in various books and research manuscripts from ancient India, but it has not been catalogued, marketed, and presented at the global level. That's the main challenge. And as you know, Westerners in the United States, they are the king in marketing. So there's actually one of the oldest scientific societies in the United States. It's called the New York Academy of Sciences. Recently, they started a program called the Global STEM Alliance, and I was invited to be the student committee chairman of that particular program. And through that, I helped organize programs to bring ideas from young scholars from over 68 countries, scientific, technological, engineering, and math-based innovative ideas. Help them prototype, develop, and catalog that. So that that way that the global knowledge can be shared collectively and developed. So I was involved in that capacity. So who likes eating sweets here? Everyone, right? The reason why we are able to eat kheer and sweets today is thanks to the pioneering achievements of ancient Indians. In ancient India, we were the first to cultivate sugarcane at an industrial scale, crystallize it, refine it, and it's in the form of jaggery. That's the traditional form. It's also the more healthy form compared to white sugar, the bleached white sugar that's sold by Domino's. That's not so healthy that you put in tea and coffee. That's why I encourage all of you, in all the recipes in your kitchen, try and substitute jaggery in place of the white sugar. And today, sugar is a $78 billion global market. It's become a really big business. But this process of refining and utilizing sugar is originally from India. And this has been given in Vishnugupta Chanakya's Arthashastra. He mentions it, and that goes back to the 2nd century CE. And also in the records of the Gupta dynasty, there's records of taxation and regulation of these sugar refining factories. And that's around 350 CE. Diamonds. If you look at India's export data from 2023, you'll see that diamonds accounts for roughly 15% of the exports from India. And today, diamonds at the global level are $100 billion market. But way back in ancient India, they understood the science of gemology, but not just cutting and polishing gems. They also took pride in the work. There was the traders in gems. They developed a gem classification system, as well as how to test gemstones in order to safeguard against counterfeits in the jewelry market. And nowadays, the Westerners, they've developed a similar, they copied it and developed a similar system, VVS, VS. And there's also grades of colors of diamonds like D through Z. But this has all been given in a text called the Ratna Pariksha, which dates back to 323 BCE. Any surgeons in the audience today? Or any physicians? Doctors? What's your practice?
Anesthesia.
And how about you, sir?
Allergy.
Allergy? Nice. So, in the United States, a lot of the leading physicians, especially in fields like ENT, gastroenterology, cardiology, cardiac surgery, neurosurgery, they're all people of Indian origin. But if you look back in ancient India, around the 7th century BC, we have produced the world's first surgeon by the name of Shushruta. And not only producing the surgeon, he was also, so if you look in some of the top universities like Penn Medicine, Harvard Medical School, you will find that a lot of the practicing physicians, they are also engaged in medical research. But this concept was put into practice by Shushruta long before. He also engaged in medical research. He conducted some of the first dissections of the human body, identifying the organ systems present in humans, giving diagrams which are still found in the Sushruta Samhita of the various organs. There's also discussion of possible preventative measures and cures for a common disease which is known as angina or heart pain. But one of the most important achievements of Shushruta, I think, is that he is the world's first plastic surgeon. Today, plastic surgery is a very big business. Globally, it's a $55 billion market. But Shushruta is the one that performed the first rhinoplasty. Rhinoplasty is a nose-based cosmetic surgery. So he would take a flap of skin from the cheek and transplant it onto the nose. And he also used to collect a lot of fees for doing this. And he used to utilize those fees to conduct his research and also, teach his disciples. And use it for good purpose. That's very important. The money that you make, you need to donate and utilize it for good purpose. And this rhinoplasty was very popular among the daughters of nobles in ancient India, as well as princesses and queens. But this cosmetic surgery and rhinoplasty technology was also utilized for good purpose. back then there was also burn victims, so they would utilize this principle of skin grafts in order to help rehabilitate and cure them as well. Another critical innovation of Shushita ji is the development of surgical tools. He developed forceps, medical hammer, scalpels, and many other tools which he diagrams in his text. And as I mentioned in the bio, I come from a Vedic background and I'm a direct descendant of Atreya Maharishi. And in the Mahabharata, Bhishma, he writes that Atreya Maharishi is the one who received the Ayurvedic knowledge and transmitted it across India. So from a very young age, I understood that and I was motivated to do something good in the field of medicine. So I conducted scientific research with Nobel Prize winner. And looking at that, I was invited by Harvard Medical School to conduct research in the field of biopharmaceuticals and drug discovery. And I developed scientific and mathematical models for the same. And looking at that, MIT has awarded me and named an asteroid in outer space in my name. So one day, I hope to visit that asteroid. With the young minds, the young bright minds in the audience, I'm sure that will be possible. So tonsil inflammation, strep throat, these are all very common diseases. But back as far as 1000 BCE, the tonsillectomy procedure has been described in Indian literature. Today, it's valued at globally at a $700 million market, removing tonsils. And let me tell you an interesting story about tonsils. Back in ancient India, there was a king by the name of Akbar, and he had a minister, Birbal. So one day Akbar, he came down with this tonsillitis disease, with his tonsils inflamed, he couldn't swallow. I'm sure many of the physicians know the common symptoms of that disease, very painful and uncomfortable. So the royal physician came and he consulted with Akbar, did all the examinations, and he gave him some medicine. But he told him that you need to swallow this medicine together with bull's milk. Now Akbar asked him, I've only heard of cow's milk, I've never heard of bull's milk. How is that possible? And this doctor, he had a previous tiff with Birbal, the minister Birbal. So he wanted to create some kind of conflict here. In the workplace, they call this ladai, they have, workplace politics. So he wanted to create some kind of conflict and pull down Birbal, because Birbal was known for solving any type of problem, any situation or problem or conflict that he came across, he was known for solving it. So he wanted to break that reputation. The workplace, business or career, your reputation is very important, right? Based on your reputation, that's why people who have worked in a particular field for 20 to 30 years, they're able to command high fees, they're given great awards, they are the head of the association, American Medical Association or other organizations like that. So like that, Birbal had developed a strong reputation in Agra and the surrounding kingdom. So the Akbar called Birbal and he narrated to him this entire episode, and to which Birbal was shocked too. He said, bulls, they can't give milk, only cows can give milk. But Akbar said, you are able to solve every single major problem in this kingdom. So I trust you to solve this problem as well. So Birbal said, okay, I'll find a solution. Then Birbal, being a minister, he attended to various problems and court cases that had come. People had come with their problems. He dealt with that, and then in the evening, just like minister, it's a big post, but ultimately at the end of the day, everyone is a human, right? So he went back home, and his wife had cooked a very nice chapati and sabji for him. So he ate that, and his daughter was also there. So they were discussing about this whole episode, over the dinner table, and his daughter, being born in the Birbal's household, is very sharp, right? So she said, I've come up with a solution for this challenging predicament, and it will also cure, it'll help solve Akbar's tonsillitis problem. In the late night, she took the clothes from the house and went to the banks of the Yamuna river and started cleaning them very loudly in the water, making a lot of splashing noise and also making thud noises, slapping it on the rocks. That's the traditional. Nowadays, everyone puts it in the GE washing machines. They have the latest, ecologically friendly washing machines. But back then, washing by the riverside on the ghats, that's the traditional method of washing clothes. And I think that's actually a little bit better because no matter how much companies market that their washing machines are the best, you put the Tide detergent and everything will come clean. I think the traditional method of washing clothes in India makes the clothes very, very clean and also without wrinkles. Because nowadays, if you put it into the dryer without the fabric softener, the clothes become very wrinkled, right? So she started doing this, and the spot she chose was very strategic. Because Akbar's palace was right on the banks of the Yamuna river, and she, being the daughter of the minister, she knew where his bedroom window was. So she was doing this near his bedroom window, and Akbar was a little bit of a light sleeper. So he woke up quick, and he got frustrated. Kings back then, they had a lot of power, they had a lot of ego. So he told his guards, go and figure out what's going on. Is it an enemy spy, trying to do preparations for an attack on our kingdom? So the guard went over there and he asked this daughter of Birbal, he asked her, who are you? To which she said, I'm a human being and a girl. Then the guard, getting a little frustrated, he said, you know how police are in India, right? You have to answer them straightforward, otherwise they get a little frustrated and get angry and they take the next steps. So this guard asks, whose daughter are you? And she says, my father's. So he gets even more frustrated. And she asks, who's your father? She said, my mother's husband. He said, it's time for you to go meet the king. Let's see what punishment he gives. You're impeding my investigation. So the guard goes before Akbar and he narrates this whole episode. And Akbar, also being a little cranky and having been woken up at the late night time, he asks her, why are you washing clothes this late at night? And there's a certain time and place for you to wash clothes. This is not appropriate. Curfew has already been, everybody's sleeping. To which the daughter said, my father, he has given birth to a baby this afternoon. And, I had to help with all that. But not, so that's why I'm having to wash the clothes in the evening so that it can be worn in the morning tomorrow by the family. Akbar was shocked. He said, how can a father give birth to a baby? Only mothers give birth to a baby, right? To which Birbal's daughter replied, well, if a bull can give milk, then certainly a father can give birth to a baby too in his kingdom. A lot of strange things are happening in his kingdom. The king is giving order to procure bull's milk. So certainly a father can give birth to a baby. Akbar was a bit shocked and he understood that she must be a relative of Birbal. So he asked her, who are you and who's your family? She said, my father is Birbal. So Akbar said, I have received the bull's milk. I will please go tell your father Birbal that his task has been accomplished. But the girl, if she goes back, her father may not believe her. So she said, how will he believe me? To which Akbar, he went to his desk, wrote on a piece of paper, royal official proclamation paper, he wrote, the bull's milk has been received through your daughter. And he put the official royal stamp. She went back and gave it to Birbal, and Birbal understood everything. Next day, in the court, where all the ministers and physicians are there, Birbal presented this proclamation to Akbar, and it was read. And the physician was shocked as to how the bull's milk could have been procured. And he understood the greatness of Birbal, and pretty soon Akbar's tonsillitis got cured. So what this shows is that, in ancient India, we have always, prioritized meritocracy. People in professions who have achieved very strong and have made great achievements, they are given their due respect. So now I want to talk about Jain mathematics. In Jain mathematics, in contrast to some of the Hindu mathematics, there's always an emphasis on pure mathematics. In fact, in ancient India, Jain mathematicians were originators of the study of pure mathematics. And there's an emphasis on large and infinite numbers. There's a text called Surya Prajapati, in which there is a discussion on number theory and real theory. It classifies the entire set of numbers into three categories. Innumerable numbers, these are common numbers that we utilize in daily commerce, 1, 100, 100,000. You have innumerable numbers. These are very large numbers that are finite, but they are large numbers, such as 1 trillion, a gajillion. And then infinite numbers, that is a boundless quantity. Similar to how mother's love for child or devotion for and respect for the Tirthankaras, that's the boundless and infinite quantity. But not only this classification of numbers, there has also been a discussion on the various subsets of infinity. And this was only discussed by Western mathematicians, a person by the name of John Napier in the 18th century. This has been discussed by Jain mathematicians long before that. There's infinity in one direction, infinity in two directions, infinite area, and perpetual infinity. So one direction is positive infinity, two directions is, if you take a xy coordinate plane from negative infinity to positive infinity, an infinite area and perpetual, that brings in the time dimension. So that's where you get multivariable calculus and Fourier transforms. And also in the 9th century CE, there was a Jain mathematician by the name of Mahavir. He lived in the Mysore region of Karnataka. He wrote a book called the Ganitsara Sangraha. And you know how previously I talked about how in ancient India they didn't really catalog and talk about terminology. Well, he is very unique. Before, mathematics was a little bit unorganized, but he developed terminology and a systematic way of mathematical education that was propagated to other students of Jain mathematics. Furthermore, he developed the theory of imaginary numbers. So there's real numbers and there's imaginary numbers. Imaginary numbers are like square root of negative numbers, which is I. And also he developed a nice solution, how to find a solution for a least common multiple of a group of numbers. So like this, there are many other inventions, scientific and mathematical, in ancient India. I'd like to end with a nice story. Recently, there was a Gujarati industrialist by the name of Banwarlal Raghunath Doshi. His net worth is 600 crores. He is the owner of a company in India called DR International. It's a plastics manufacturing and trading unit. He started long back borrowing 30,000 rupees from his father. They were in Rajasthan at the time. And he came to Delhi, took the risk, and started this unit, which has now blossomed into a big business. Recently, having developed the business, and of course there's a lot of stress and challenges that come with that, he realized that the best way to find peace is to become a Jain Acharya. So in Ahmedabad, recently he arranged for a big ceremony and became the 108th Shishya of a Jain Acharya. Gautam Adani was also present in that function. And in that, Banwarlalji, he says that he has been listening and learning from Jain Pravachan for over 30 years. So what this shows is that in spite of our professional backgrounds and what work we are engaged in on a daily basis, for the sustenance of family and whatnot, it shows that there is a lot more that is to be learned from Jainism. And with that, I would like to conclude and open the floor for question and answer from the audience.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You talk about the chase, but I thought before the chase is what Gujarat is calling Chopad. And Chopad is supposed to be the most ancient game. Am I right or wrong? The one which is
Yes. Yes, yeah, that's what I mentioned when I was talking about chess. You know, nowadays in Italy is where the modern rules of chess were developed. But you know, let me go back to that slide. You know, chess originally was called Chaturan, and they had a slightly different set of rules for how chess was to be played. But the origin of playing this type of game on the Ashtapada or the 8x8 board, that's from India, and many of the rules are similar. Of course, the piece names are different. You know, king is called Raja, queen is called Rani, rook is called Gaja. So like that, there are some minor differences, and in the bishop, the mantri, the bishop, there are some minor difference in the rules and the movements of the pieces. But that game got, it was exported from India to, via the Arabic countries and Persian traders to Europe, and then they developed the modern rules of chess. But it's originally from India, Chaturan.
But Chopad is not like square board like that. It is like plus sign. It's almost like
Oh, that's the Pachisi you're talking about.
yeah. She's talking about Chopad.
Because it is like a board.
Yeah, it'll be like a
Square and that's square.
yeah.
Square like
Plus
plus
sign.
sign.
Plus sign, yeah. So that game was also very popular. That's a slightly different game. That game was, it's before Chaturan, like you mentioned, and that game is also very popular. In fact, that
Because
game,
Rama and Mahabharata.
Mahabharata, yeah, the dice game. That's the game that was played by Yudhishthir and Shakuni, and a lot of strategic thinking, a little bit of luck involved in that game too. Of course, if you're in Mahabharata, if you're playing against Shakuni, there's not that much luck involved. The game outcome is already predetermined. But yeah, that's also one of the traditional games. And then nowadays they call Mancala, the marbles with the holes, the two rows. So that's also another traditional game from India.
I want to add about ancient Chinese the rules about boiling water. This it's quite antiseptic measure to have. Now everyone knows that you need to boil water and then so it is you don't get diseases. But this comes back many centuries ago, and then they knew how to boil water and then not get sick. And another thing was about the roots. Chinese don't eat those potatoes and
Right.
things developed below the ground. And the ground has lots and lots of bacteria. So if you get any roots but don't boil it or clean it very well, you are going to get sick. And probably they knew it way back about all these antiseptic measures and what bacteria and viruses are, and they put it in their regular, normal routines to have this boiled water, not have any those roots, and things like that.
Right, yeah, they had a very deep understanding, and in fact, if they've done excavations of the Indus Valley civilizations, and belief is that it got wiped out by a flood, possibly, and they checked, and in fact, looking at the construction and excavations, they were able to find that there were water supply lines, there were toilets, and also waste drainage lines as well. So that was that kind of technology was developed in ancient India and Bharat long before. In fact, I mentioned I've done research with Nobel Prize winners. I recently, on their encouragement, I've started an organization called American STEM Institute, and we're planning on opening an office this year in India, where we bring and encourage inventions from semi-urban and rural markets in India. Because there's a lot of invention and ideas in those pockets of India, but it's not being brought to the global stage. So our idea is to, identify, help them prototype and develop that, patent it and bring it to the international market and sell at a profit, so that our organization can make money, and also the inventors can be supported and make money as well.
The plastic surgery, now it is recognized here also, that it started from India. And they give example in Junagadh, it is a town in Saurashtra, Gujarat.
Right.
That's where they used to polish before some people to cut the nose.
Right.
And that plastic surgeon about 200 years ago or something started reconstructing the nose. And that's where plastic surgery started. And it is recognized all over the world that plastic surgery, the recent modern plastic surgery came from Junagadh, started from Junagadh.
Right. It's actually quite possible, that if you check the ancient history of where Shushruta lived, he was in that area region of northwest India. Of course, they traveled a lot, and the records are a little bit sparse, but it's quite possible that he developed, and that got handed to practitioners down the line, and then it became developed in a modern sense in Junagadh, and now it's a global business.
Right. But even plastic surgery books mentions that it started in Junagadh, plastic surgery.
Yes.
What do you do for living?
I run a management consult. I went to Wharton Business School, so I run a management consulting business focused on healthcare and real estate management. So physical and group practices and hospital systems, when they want to expand to new markets, I do a lot of consulting for them on those types of projects. And furthermore, I also do consulting and for real estate, pure real estate development projects as well. So I travel around the country, and when I have time, so I do pravachans like this in mandirs around the country, to spread good message. So you had a question?
Yeah, you mentioned, it's a matter of pride for us that some of these invention or scientific discoveries were done hundreds and thousands of years ago before Western world realized them. It is also unfortunate that it was not globalized or marketed at that time for us to get benefit out of it.
Right.
Now that you're part of such research and organizations, do you know any or couple of significant inventions which were done before and which are written in our books, but Western world has not realized them yet? So that we wake up late and still start marketing them and globalize them.
Right. Actually, if you look at it, organizations like NASA and the Department of Energy, they're involved in nuclear technology. Those laboratories, they actually understood what I'm talking about at a very early stage. So, they've done research on a lot of these. Usually, it's written on palm leaf manuscripts or those types of articles. So they have deployed scientists and teams from here to India to conduct research. So a lot of the inventions have actually been identified by Western teams of scientists, and they're utilizing it for their own benefit. But further research is being conducted in universities like Banaras Hindu University and other institutions around the country. They are still conducting research, and of course there's a lot more to be discovered. In fact, in my lecture I mentioned the Chanakya Arthashastra that was actually discovered by a researcher in the Karnataka region when he was perusing through the manuscripts, and suddenly he came across it and he published it and distributed it at a national level. People talk about Machiavelli and Karl von Clausewitz and Sun Tzu as being the propagators of military and geopolitical strategy. But the Gupta dynasty, Chandragupta Maurya, they all knew this long time before. So there are more innovations, and recently startups are really booming in India. There's recently a pharmaceutical discovery utilizing the strands and fibers from coconuts. So they utilize that to develop a sort of pharmaceutical medicine. It's in the early stages, but I'm sure it's been given support by the Tamil Nadu government. But I'm sure it will become, commercialized in a few years.
Yeah, the problem is like all of the manuscripts that we have,
Right.
when Muslim came and almost everything they burned it, destroyed it.
Right.
And the Britishers and even the Hitler took a lot of stuff, and they are in the museums all around the place. You don't have access to it.
Right.
Lots of manuscripts, even Jainism.
Yeah, actually, on that point, I wanted to mention, I talked about Ram Mandir, but, in Delhi, there's this place called Qutub Minar, right? And I mentioned the learned senior advocate Harishankar Jain. He founded the organization Hindus for Justice, but through that, he's also doing a lot of good work for Jain temples as well. So they have filed a case in the High Court now to, reclaim the Qutub Minar and, rebuild a lot of the Jain temple complex that was present in that area.
What do you think? We were so smart, all those things. But why we could not defend ourselves? Hindu, Jain, whatever. We've been ruled by Muslims, British. Before that, what is the reason? Are we basically coward people? Or why we cannot defend ourselves?
Well, I think actually we're very brave people. If you look at the exploits and success of people like Shivaji Maharaj. But have you watched the Chanakya serial? Anybody watched it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in fact, if you look around the 13th or 14th episode of that serial, when the Alexander is invading, you will see that Vishnugupta Chanakya, he is emphasizing that the provinces of the northwest, which is in present day Punjab, that they need to unite, because if they stand divided, it's hard to, you need to give a unified front. In fact, that idea is utilized in the American Revolution as well. United we stand, divided we fall. But unity is very important. That's the main challenge in, to bring this to the global level, and why we were victims of military conquest is there was intra-Bharat conflict between various kingdoms.
And we had traitors also,
Right.
coming from the royal families.
Of course, yeah. People. So in India, the tradition is the eldest son is the one who gets coronated, but you would have some of these second sons and third sons creating, bringing in the foreigners and creating problems.
So, talking about these examples that we already have proven that they were invented or we knew about them like much before, and when you attend all these kind of conferences, at least now people are realizing that India was much ahead, like because
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
education
yeah.
system we still hear like Newton, but
Right. Yeah, they definitely are realizing, but I think the challenge with a lot of these conferences, there's global conferences and national conferences that are happening in the United States. The problem is only that Indians are the ones who are understanding this. We need to disseminate this to Europeans and Americans so that they understand. And a lot of them are curious nowadays, so that's why I encourage each one of you, pick something from this presentation that you really resonated with you, or something else that you may know, and in your workplace, or maybe even in the grocery store, we have Publix here. If you meet somebody, or in a colloquial setting, you can tell them about one of these inventions. I give you a challenge, tell at least 5 people before the end of January.
Propagate the message.
Okay.
I was wondering, since there are lots of Asian comparisons to the present time, and and the way that now the Raman is building, and so many stories are coming out, the Asian stories and other things.
Right.
Have you ever thought about how this name India, Bharat, and now everybody is claiming that our gurus or our king and this and that. Have you researched on that? Our original name of the India.
Well, India anciently, it's
Because there is a lot of conflicts going on too in that. So
right, yeah. Recently in the G20 summit, the invitation, the Indian delegation, the foreign ministry, they published the invitation with the name Bharat, not India.
Yeah.
And the name Bharat, it comes from Mahabharat. That's how it came through. Chakravarti Bharat, who is one of the ancestors of the Pandavas and Kauravas. He conquered the entire of India. So that's how the name Bharat came, and that's how the Akhand Bharat and all those concepts came. But originally, India, it is a group of provinces with various kingdoms that are fighting against each other, and also a lot of the kingdoms, like if you take the Shoya dynasty from southern India, they've actually conquered parts of present day Vietnam. So that's why you have the Angkor Wat temple, and also Indonesia, Sri Vijaya kingdoms in Malaysia and Malacca Straits. So I think the Indian concepts and ideas have actually traveled a little bit further than what is currently Bharat. And also so like that, there's a
Because when you go to the Angkor Wat, they will say that this is actually Surya. Everything is important of the Surya, It's
Right.
like a sun, and all these temples and all is based on the ancient history of the sun.
Right.
So it's kind of complicated,
yes. You had.
I have a question very quickly. You mentioned the book of maths with the imaginary numbers and stuff. Is that book like anywhere online, transcripts of it?
Yeah, there are certain books that are online. A lot of them you can find it on, it's a website called archive.org, they publish them. And also Google Books, if you order online, you can find. Yeah, but most of those kind of copies, that's a little bit more of a rarer manuscript. So those types of copies, you would probably have to find a specialty bookstore in India to buy. I know a lot of the Hindu books, they have the Gita Press and Gorakhpur, but I'm sure for the Jain manuscripts, there's also similar bookstores, possibly in regions of Gujarat as well.
We
that
have
you
a
can
Jain
order.
book. I will give you.
Yeah, that you can.
The calling system.
Yeah, that you can order.
So you mentioned you are part of American STEM Institute or Indian, I forget.
Yeah, it's American STEM Institute. The website is americansteminstitute.us.
Okay. And you mentioned you are working with rural and not semi-urban researchers and so on in India.
Yes.
Is there a reason to not do this with the more smarter minds in some good schools or universities like IIT? Well, I know IITs are mostly.
Right.
I think we keep playing this victim's card, right? Mughals did this to us and Britishers did that to us. We all know that. Yeah,
Right.
India has a great history. And in the present modern India, if we all know what we have, what the capabilities are, do you believe that we are invested enough to sort of get the best out of ourselves versus just playing the victim card, they took everything away from us? Well,
Right. If you look at it from the victim card perspective, I think that kind of talk has been it's been propagated. But nowadays, the dynamic and level of India on the geopolitical stage is changing. Coming to partnering with top institutions in India, there's already a lot of support from the Indian government to various state startup funds for ideas and concepts in those universities. But there's a lot of unique ideas from regional universities in India. So that's our primary focus. And many of them are top institutions. Nowadays IIT has been talked about, and of course it's a top institution, but there are a lot of very good regional universities as well.
okay.
And actually, I talked about geometry and trigonometry. I wanted to highlight one more invention. There was this astronomer by the name of Bhaskara. He lived in the Ujjain region, and when he was doing a lot of this astronomical research, this is long before Europeans, they were living in the dark ages. They still thought that Earth is the center of the solar system, Sun is not. So, and then Copernicus came, but actually when they were doing this astronomical research and studying the elliptical path of travel, a lot of calculus concepts came into play. Instantaneous rate of movement of various planets. So in that process, they developed, without calling it by that name, they developed and discovered mean value theorem and Rolle's theorem, which are very important theorems for the foundation of single variable calculus.
Interesting. Thank you.
So Hanuman Chalisa goes how many years back?
I think it was sometime around the 16th century, if I'm correct, where there was a lot of Bhakti movement in India. So there were composers like Tulsidas and Ramdas. They composed a lot of these, a lot of these poems and songs and bhajans like Hanuman Chalisa, Maruti Stotra, and others like that.
So that time they knew the distance between the sun and the earth.
Yes, definitely, because there's a lot of astronomy.
So I don't know how long before that the knowledge was there, but the description is there in
Hanuman Chalisa.
Hanuman Chalisa.
Right.
Just quickly, do you have any book recommendations, like published book recommendations for teenagers and for us to kind of read to get to know more about this Indian history and scientific inventions and stuff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are certainly a lot of books, but you come and meet me afterwards. I'll send you. It depends on what your interests are.
Sure.
So I'll give you a few recommendations.
In your presentation, you mentioned that Indian scientists came up with single and multivariable calculus before Newton did. I just wanted to ask, were those techniques that they used to do the calculus completely different than Newton, or was it just the same thing that they invented earlier?
You mean, were their techniques similar to Newton's techniques?
Were their techniques different from Newton's but still calculus, or were they similar to his, just invented earlier?
I would say they were, markedly similar, but they were earlier. And of course, there were some unique techniques as well. Because there's a lot of invention, we have a 45-minute, 1-hour presentation. So I covered some of the major ones, but if you go and read a lot of the texts that have been authored by these stalwarts, you'll find they've also given a lot discussion on a lot of other topics as well. In the minutiae, real number theory and imaginary number theory, but the audience is the general audience, not necessarily mathematicians.
So how much of these, I would say, claiming of that this was done, by this Indian, that far back, how much is really have backed by a solid documentation?
Well, I mean, it's all pretty much backed by the primary source. You check, they looked at the manuscripts and that's how they identify.
And if it is backed by a solid source, why, is one going to fix the history to say, oh, this was not done by Edison or Newton or this guy, right? Actually, it was done by this person, in 700 BCE.
Yeah, I mean, there are discussions to improve the history, but for that, like I mentioned to the answer, you need a unified front. And
another BJP government.
BJP government, right? What about BJP government? Modi has broken that.
Just kidding.
I think Indian history is already accounting for those. If you're referring to global history, well then.
Yeah, global history.
Yeah,
so I mean, you need a unified front and the global.
Exactly.
Even Indian history is recently changed, but when Jawaharlal Nehru came, he has completely modernized Indian history and he removed everything for first 30 to 40 years of the Indian history, that there was no mention of all those Vedic and all. So that's the biggest issue India faced, Jawaharlal Nehru.
I always mention, due to, after independence,
Yes.
if Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel
Yeah.
was not given the task to unify the country, because Nehruji, it actually came from a southern Indian, Rajaji.
Mhm.
His idea is, if you keep Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel here, you won't be able to become a prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
So give him a task, say you are the Iron Man and go unify the nation. So he is busy with other activities, so you can become a prime minister. And actually, Rajaji is the one who came up with adding Pandit to Jawaharlal Nehru's name. He was no Pandit. Rajaji said, this is the only way you're going to get vote from every Indian, every politician around the country. So we will call you Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. That's how he became prime minister, and then Vallabhbhai Patel was busy with actually putting India together.
Right.
Because if Mr. Patel was going to be the prime minister, the India today would have been so much different, because 2 generations were not taught about Chhatrapati Shivaji and Chandragupta Maurya. So many findings, the steel
Yeah, so if you look at, I mentioned about Department of Energy, there's something called Woods steel, that's the English name for it. It's a knife that, it's very hard to destruct it because of its special metallurgical properties. And that was, back in India, I mentioned jewelry, but we were also very strong in metallurgy. If you look at Arthashastra, in the administration section, he talks about how there was a Ministry of Mines and how mining was a very critical activity for the economic well-being of the kingdom. So through those, knowledge of metallurgy, and we're also the inventors of how to, properly mine and refine zinc. So through that, they developed this wood steel sword, which was very hard to break in fighting. And now there are researchers from the Livermore National Laboratory, which is one of the nuclear laboratories in the Department of Energy. They have tried to reconstruct that, but today they still haven't been able to reconstruct the exact steel. And also on the topic of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, you mentioned the Jungad province. He was very instrumental in making sure that stays within India. In fact, next Sunday, I have been invited by the Hindu temple next door on Republic Day to give a presentation on him.
Okay.
So if you're interested, please come and contact me, and I'll give you the information on attending.
There's a question there. Rashmi.
I have a question. I know you said that Western society is realizing that India has they accomplished this before the Western society did. But do you think it's important for politicians there to be a more powerful force to try to get back? For example, the British Museum still has a lot of goods that they captured from India still on display, including different varieties of manuscripts and stuff. So do you think it's important for India to play more of a force in trying to get those back? And own them?
Yeah.
So it's like a big step. What is on the showcase is stuff. There is a lot more inside the ethics and the stuff. British Modi should claim all of those stuff.
Right. Yeah. Actually, if you look at everybody in America, they really talk about Queen inauguration, Queen this, Queen that. It's really a big thing. But I don't pay too much attention to that. But actually, if you look at the English crown, the diamonds on the crown are the Kohinoor diamonds from India. And also, a lot of the wealth was transferred by rail to India. The rail system was not developed in India for the purposes of transport. Now it's being used, but it was developed for the purposes of transferring the wealth. And back then we had, kings had built big temple complexes. So actually, if you look in Kerala, there's a famous Ranganatha Swami temple in Trivandrum. So in there, they have identified recently chambers. There's 3 chambers, and they are sealed with these kind of Naga mantras and snake mantras. And in that, there's a lot of the temple wealth that has still been safeguarded. So they used to put a lot of the wealth into the temple walls and make it very challenging to open. So that was one way of protecting some of the wealth. But yeah, I think India, the current leadership, they are, making steady steps toward reclaiming some of the, idols and, diamonds and other wealth.
However, the question also is, yes, reclaiming that is important for our pride, but what new we are creating, what innovations we are doing, right? I think somewhere in the centuries we have lost that innovative focus, and we are just relying too much on what our ancestors had done in talking about them. Any thought on that?
Right, yeah, for innovation, back then you needed back then you had strong government support. So they would give, grants of universities and lands to, people who wish to do this kind of research and support them, and of course give them rewards when they find interesting innovations. Now, when you try to do those kind of things, a lot of politics comes in, because back then it's a monarchical system, so you're able to, it's a one-man leadership, like how in a company you have one CEO. Any business owners here? Okay. So when you have a CEO of a company, it's a top-down environment. But now we have a constitutional structure and a federal structure. So there's a lot of state versus federal conflict, and you have regional parties too. So there's a bit of challenge in that.
I have a similar question to his. Do you think it's really worth all the effort to rewrite global history versus putting all the effort into doing more innovation? Like, does it really matter if people start saying, yes, India did it versus someone else did it, versus putting all their energy into actually doing something new?
I think both are important, because when you put the effort into talking about the history of India, it motivates young people who study that in India to do the innovation. So it's kind of a virtuous cycle.
Brings the pride back.
Yeah, brings the pride back and confidence. Like you mentioned, Hanuman Chalisa, the confidence is very important for succeeding in any endeavor.
Even for COVID-19 vaccine,
Right, like, yeah, in the medicine, Indians are far ahead. Like, most of the medicine, all research coming from India.
Yeah, I mentioned 15% export of gems. Pharmaceuticals and medicines accounts for another 10 to 15% of exports. Those are the two, and then of course textiles.
See what we need, like, we are all migrated here, is youngster. In a Jainism books, here we don't go more, but there are so many Jainism books. They talk about the astrophysics, physics,
right,
nuclear physics, and all. Our new generation should take an interest. Some of the things there that Western science is saying is bakwas. We should study and prove it. Scientifically we prove it that this theory or whatever that's written, it's right. And that's what's needed. There are still a lot more, of course, in the Indian books and stuff. That's nobody else. And like even our kids, in a Jainism we tell so many things, and we tell our kids, my son says, no, it's bakwas. Why you prove it? Well, spend a time. Whoever wrote it 3,000 years ago knew it about it. So that's the main thing that we need in the young generation.
Why don't you give this podcast? Nowadays people listen to the podcast.
Oh, you mean like the astrological podcast?
Podcast.
Oh, podcast. Okay.
Yeah, that was people listen is good.
Yeah, sure. I'll look into that. If you have any contacts, you let me know. I'll come on any show and talk about it.
I think that's common. Nowadays people listen more. Yeah, I enjoy podcast and the reading books and all that thing.
Right.
I have a question. Do you personally believe in things like astrology and zodiac signs?
Yes, yeah. Well, I actually, in the bio I briefly discussed it, but I actually come from a Vedic background back in India. My great grandfather, they were very esteemed and learned pundits. So that's who I learned all the knowledge from, and he was one of the chief astrologers. Like, all the wealthy people in that region, if they wanted, before they do a shadi or any kind of important function, they would always come to him to show him the horoscope. So, yeah, I do have strong belief in that.
And have you studied any of those things, like
Yes.
Manjari or anything?
Yes, yeah, Vedic astrology.
Oh.
Yeah.
do you check the horoscope in the newspaper?
Do I check mine? So, like, how I mentioned Shushruta and how there is a medical ethics. Astrologers, we also have our own ethics. We don't check, in general, we don't check our own families and our close relatives' horoscopes because there's a conflict of interest. We have understood that. Like, are there any attorneys in the audience? No. So, but attorneys, they will have this, they have this sort of conflict of interest and a lot of rules about who they can represent. So, like that, astrologers, we always do for third parties, we don't do for ourselves.
And I think that science has been lost, like there are very few.
That has been preserved. That has been preserved because when the invaders came, a lot of the Vedic pundits from Maharashtra, Gujarat, they all traveled to southern India. In fact, from Gujarat, in Tamil Nadu, there's a group of people called Saurashtra, They actually speak the Saurashtra language. So, but they're originally from Gujarat.
But then if you think about it, Ramayana, Mahabharata especially, they're talking about the missiles, they're talking about all those things.
Yeah.
So that knowledge was there, or the description was there.
Right, yeah, there's actually description of various, helicopter-like vehicles, like not just Pushpa Vimana, others too, they've given diagrams. And they've also done research, Kurukshetra on the ground, and they find some residual, they do the nuclear testing, radioactive testing. They find some, radioactive particles in the ground there.
And also like Chakravyu and like the
Right.
whole, like the
Military formations. Right.
We still have 5-10 minutes. We are not ready in that. Okay?
So I'll ask a question. Were you born here or
Ask
you
one
moved
question.
from
I was born. Sorry, repeat.
Were you born here in this country or you had your earlier education in India?
I was born in Bangalore.
Okay.
And I came here at a very young age, so I had a lot of my education here. But I was remaining in touch with my roots. So every one year or every 2 years, I like to go back to India and visit all the important
Temples.
Tirtha stalls and all that.
Sorry, we came late and I think we missed your introduction.
Yeah, that's.
So if you can repeat a little bit in small. So
Sure. Yeah, my name is Sugandh Kannan. I am I'm long time native of South Florida. I live in Weston. I graduated from Wharton Business School. It's the #1 business school in the world. That's where Google CEO Sundar Pichai, Elon Musk, Ambani, they all have studied there. Trump and also Lakshmi Mittal, Mittal Steel, they also studied there. So, now I run a management consulting business focused on healthcare and real estate management. So I travel around the country and I give pravachans and lectures like this to spread good message and mainly, motivate the youngsters so they understand and they can carry forward in the next generation and maintain the traditions. From my family background, I'm a direct descendant of Atreya Maharishi. In the Mahabharata itself, in the Shanti Parva, Bhishma says that Atreya Maharishi is the foremost authority on Ayurveda. And my great-grandfather, on my maternal and paternal side, they were very learned Vedic Pandits, so I learned a lot from them and I keep the tradition going forward.
So can you read Sanskrit and?
Yeah, I know how to chant Sanskrit mantras.
But like you can teach, translate.
Yes.
Do you believe the knowledge is continues to get propagated to the newer generations? Like you are here now, so would that chain continue, or at some point?
Yeah, the main challenge with the generation, the second generation here, is the first generation they came and they built the wealth and they built nice temples like this, and they run the Sunday programs. But you also need a lot of strong push from the family and the household. That's really critical. And a great way to develop that is to take few trips back to India, visit important stalls and teach them the greatness and of course eat good food as well when you go to India. That's really mirchi bhaji, sweets. Those are all. They taste a lot better here than they do in a restaurant like Woodlands.
For sure.
So I have a question. Like in our Jain center, we have same problem. We came from India, first generation. Everybody participating, but all of our second generation, like most of the year, nobody has. Up to the high school, they are okay, come here, but they are all like. So what we can do to motivate them, join back to the center and or the Indian community.
Right. Yeah, Jain. To practicing your faith is very important. That is what gives you the strength to continue in your professional career. I think that needs to be impressed upon youth, upon the Jain youth. And coming to Mandir often is very critical. But like I mentioned, in coming to the Pathashala, that's all good. That forms the seed or the beach. But to develop it further, you need strong backup and support from the household. Teaching them the various aspects at a very young age. Starting very young is very important, because once the young children, they reach the middle school or high school, they get exposed to a lot of other ideas, maybe negative or bad ideas, so they kind of lose the tradition. But if you started from a very young age, 3, 4, 5, 6, if you start from that age itself, speaking only Gujarati or Marathi or Hindi or Bhojpuri at the house, you will be able to develop that traditional mindset. That's very important. In fact, I encourage everyone here, your mother tongue is very important. So when your kids, you should always mandate that they speak only the mother tongue in the house, not English.
They learn, but they don't want. Prakrishbhai, I have a solution. Keep it simple. Religion faith does not have to be so complicated or so difficult to comprehend. Keep it fun, keep it simple. As long as your child or everybody's child is a good human being, that's all that matters.
No, yes, I can vouch for everybody here. All of our kids are all good human beings. Moral value wise, I'm sure, 100%.
That's all that you need.
I understand, but there are certain things still like.
They're not getting the tradition.
Not getting tradition, like see, whatever he say, like everybody says, like we have so many books and everything, What I want our kids to take a pride in our old culture and old religion, and like as we say, propagate that message, be like ambassador of that. Say, hey, I want the way the Sugandh is doing it here.
Right.
That's missing.
Pride will not come from old culture. It will come from you, how they see you living.
The mistake we did, like everybody their mistake is, like when we came here, we all went on the west. And our kids, we wanted our kids to excel in here. Everybody's kids are excelling.
Yes.
And we focus on excelling our kids on the here. And that's where we lost their interest in that stuff.
They're comparing the two words and then become
I know.
easy.
That we thought like if we teach our language and all, they will be bad in English and they will not compete in that. And that's what
actually on that, there's recently been a research done. They looked at, if you look at countries that put out strong scientific and technological innovation, you look at Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, they've actually shown that in that country, they are only educated in their mother tongue, Danish, Dutch, Swedish. They only talk in their mother tongue and they innovate in their mother tongue. Germans, very strong in manufacturing. So education in mother tongue is very critical. Like if you go back to India, everybody's goal as parents, even there, is I want my kid to study in the top, convent Catholic school, so they learn in English. Schools like Don Bosco and the top schools. Each city there it has their top private English CBSE school. But I think learning in the mother tongue and doing that, there's nothing wrong with that, and you can compete at a global level.
Expression is best in your mother tongue.
Yes,
Yeah.
but what happens in second generation? They might have married not to Gujarati girl,
Right.
or Gujarati boy. It can be completely different language, different.
Because that's not what our religion says. We come together for a reason.
But
There
then
is
you lose that.
there is some bonding.
It's lose that of mother tongue. Okay, but mix different languages.
Any more question anywhere? I know it was a very, very good discussion.
Yes.
Youngster asking that question first time, I saw it. So many we'll keep in touch and we'll try to do every quarter something like this. Yeah.
And when people come to speak, whether it be here or any other presentation, it is always important for the youngsters to be bold and ask questions. I've always seen that's a bit of a challenge, but it's important for them to put their mind and thoughts forward.
Okay. No problem.
Yeah.
So, thank you again.
Thank
Very
you.
excellent. Thank you for coming here. It was a very, very inspiring, and I guess everybody thinks the way you think it, and will do better. Okay. Next week we have Mahendra Bhai. The program that we get for Vasant Maharaj is cancelled because of that reason. After that we have some